We are really excited to welcome Jessica Mendoza from Sunday Night Baseball for the first time ever, kind of crossing over and doing us a favor, helping us look ahead to the 2016 season. So, Jess, as a former player yourself, there's a lot of excitement always as a new season approaches. What are the players feeling right now as we get into these final hours before opening day?
They just want to get on the field. And even being around spring training, being an athlete myself, like you love the preparation. There is a part of you that, especially the older you get, that you appreciate that. And then you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. Can I see just real, like this is going to count, like the adrenaline flowing? Because it's so hard, even in all these spring training games, to even really test, is this really how it's going to be? Because everyone's kind of going at a certain percentage of their best.
One of the things that's always fascinated me about the baseball season is how many games there are compared to all of the other pro sports. 162 of them. It's every day. There are very few breaks. You're away from your family for long periods of time. So how do players approach that as they break spring training, they get started? They know the next 7, maybe 8 months, their life is consumed by this.
Yeah, and I think to your point, the fact that it's every day. I mean, there are longer seasons. There are, you'll hear about like other professional sports, the length of maybe, like you're saying, the season, but it's the fact that every single day there is a game with maybe a couple days off here and there, like sprinkled in barely. But 162 games is a lot. And I think that is something that a minor league athlete, a college player, you'll see that slow adjustment period where they're great, like a Jock Peterson, phenomenal first half of the season for the Dodgers. Second half of the season, the fatigue sets in, just the mental strain, because it's a lot. And so you kind of have to learn, not necessarily pace yourself, because you don't want to not give 100%, but I think being able to understand the recovery aspect of it, like taking time to really recover your body in any way that you can, and then also mentally just taking a little bit of a break too, not always just constantly grinding every single day.
Jessica, the Cubs are all the rage right now. Everybody wants to focus on them, talk about them after the way they got to the National League Championship Series a year ago. We know that Theo Epstein is a master architect. He put together champions in Boston. He's brought a lot of pieces together on the north side of Chicago. You've seen them in spring training. You know that roster. What stands out to you with this version of the Cubs and the 2016 expectations?
The offense. I mean... And you can go in a variety of directions, obviously, with the Cubs. But they went and signed the biggest free agent contract this last year in Jason Hayward. And what he brings to the table, too, they're looking at him being in the top of the order. Also, Ben Zobrist from Kansas City Royals, who just won a World Series championship, to add already to Anthony Rizzo, who was in the running for the MVP. You got Chris Bryant, who was the Rookie of the Year. You got Kyle Schwarber, who had one of the better, come up from the minor leagues and just seriously power from him. And you just look at so many guys on this team that were already so good, and then they add to it. And you look at the lineup. I mean, Addison Russell. I mean, there is no weakness as far as what they can't do. Jake Arrieta, obviously the Cy Young Award winner, and then Joe Maddon at the helm. I mean, there's so many good things. Now, it doesn't mean they're not that they're not unbeatable. I mean, this is definitely a team that I think has some holes, but for the most part, they are looking really strong heading into the season.
We're spending a few minutes with Jessica Mendoza, who will be on Sunday Night Baseball all season long. She's a former Olympic gold medalist in softball. It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence here on CBS Sports Radio. So, Jess, last year, the Mets were that brick wall that the Cubs ran into, that pitching staff that they have. And it's not just Chicago operating in a vacuum. So when you look at the rest of the National League, some of the other pitching staffs, who stands out at you as a group of guys, a group of pitchers that can combat that Cubs offense?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the Mets, number one. I mean, there's no better pitching staff in the National League than those. I mean, you got the power four right now with Harvey, Syndergaard, DeGrom, and Matt. But then Zach Wheeler is supposed to come back from his Tommy John surgery, and he also is a power arm, hard throwing. I mean, it's going to be amazing to think what those five can do. But when you also look throughout the National League, you think about the San Francisco Giants. I mean, they went and got Johnny Cueto, they got Justin Marja to already add to Madison Bumgarner, who had a ridiculous setting career highs last season with strikeouts. His walk rates went down. But that's a team that I think a lot of people aren't talking about as much out there on the West. But even the Arizona Diamondbacks, I mean, they went and got Zach Greinke from the Dodgers. They have Shelby Miller. That was one of the most best offenses in the National League, and now they've added their pitching. So it's not going to be an easy road for any team in the National League, especially with the depth throughout the league with pitching.
And, of course, the Cardinals, who are always a challenger and are the top rival there in the NL Central for the Cubs. There's kind of a split view right now on the Diamondbacks of 2016. They make the splash in free agency, Jess. Some people think it's going to make a huge difference. Others think, So what's your view on the new and improved Diamondbacks?
I was skeptical at first just because, everyone was jumping on the D-backs bandwagon as soon as Zach Greinke went over there. Just, okay, this is the team. They're going to be the contending, at least from the NL West. And at first I'm like, you know what? One pitcher isn't going to do that. Now, being at their camp, and granted, spring training is, you take it with a grain of salt, but I think this team was like 20-6. I mean, and watching them play, things are clicking. I mean, this is an offense that really didn't get talked about with Paul Goldschmidt, A.J. Pollock, David Peralta, and they now have some pieces. And even speaking with Shelby Miller, you got to think about his time with the Braves and the run of bad luck that he had and not getting a lot of wins, but having the talent. And now it's the opposite. I mean, his eyes just lit up. He's like, this team is special. And that's the stuff you don't fake. You're around the clubhouse, you're around the team, you're watching. And I put my money on the Diamondbacks right now from the NL West.
Spending a few minutes with Jessica Mendoza, who is now part of Sunday Night Baseball full-time on ESPN. Excited to pick your brain a few more minutes here, Jess. We talked about the National League. Looking at the American League, the Royals are the defending champs, and yet nobody's really talking about them. Similar to what happened last year when they ran away with the Central Division. Being around that team, what impresses you about that group of guys?
It's just the way they play the game. I mean, I think Dayton Moore has done a fantastic job. I mean, you give Theo Epstein credit for what he's done, obviously, with the Red Sox and now the Cubs, but you look at Dayton Moore, and it's not with the flash. I mean, he's doing it, and I think the biggest offseason signing, bigger than Jason Hayward or anyone else, was the Royals re-signing Alex Gordon. This is a key piece for a team that prides itself on the fact that they have the chemistry. They have those intangibles that in a time when analytics are king. Moneyball is the thing that people talk about. The one thing you can't put a statistic on is how these guys work together, especially in the end of the season, especially when your backs are against the wall, which happened to them against the Blue Jays. And you saw how they were able to react. And Alex Gordon is a key cog with this core group of guys. Moustakas, you got Eric Hosmer, you got Salvador Perez. I mean, these guys, Alex Gordon, in that group, they came through together, and I think it's so important that they kept them together.
Speaking of the Blue Jays, it was so much fun to watch what they did last year, finally snapping that postseason drought, getting into the ALCS. We know about the offense, but they lose David Price to the Red Sox in the offseason. So, Jess, what do they do for an encore this summer?
Obviously they're not going to replace David Price, but I'm a big fan of Marcus Stroman. And just getting to know him, this guy is 5'9" at best. Okay, and he's a smaller guy, and he owns that. And it's this chip on his shoulder that's like almost a positive shit. It's not like he's walking around just like with this huge ego. He just works his tail off, and he has this mindset that I think is perfect for the ace that has to come in to this role now where there's expectations. I mean, they are the team to beat in the AL East. They still have the offense, but they don't have David Price. But this guy, Marcus Stroman, I feel like it's going to be huge for him to come in and really lead this team, at least from the pitching standpoint.
It's After Hours with Amy Lawrence on CBS Sports Radio. Excited to have Jessica Mendoza with us to look at the 2016 Major League Baseball season getting underway this weekend. You recently retired from your softball career in which you won gold and silver medals for Team USA. All eyes in the American League are on David Ortiz. His final year, he's 40 years old. It's been such a huge part of his life. He'll be celebrated everywhere he goes. But as a player who just went through it yourself, Jess, what's it like to know that the end is coming? It's near.
I think he's a perfect person for it. I mean, for me, like, I'm passionate. I'm very, not that David Ortiz isn't, but I'm like extremely like, I get into it emotionally. And so I never announced my retirement until I was done because I didn't want to have each stop, this is the last of this. And then you have the ceremonies before the game and I love the game so much that for me to think about this is the last time, like, they just made a big deal, his last spring training game, and I think for him, he's such a great asset for the game, and that he allows the perspective of these kinds of things to be put in the perfect place. And as the season progresses, and there is that emotional roller coaster, and we don't know, what kind of season he's going to have. Obviously, coming off of a tremendous season last year, but with Derek Jeter in his last season, there was a lot of controversy. Should he be batting second? Should he be in the game every day? Those kind of things. I think David Ortiz is so honest with himself, so real with the situation, that this is going to be, an emotional time, but I think it's going to be amazing to watch and see just that big poppy grin, from stop to stop. And I think he'll be hitting bombs all along the way.
Not sure there will ever be another player quite like David Ortiz. All right, so I've given you all of these hot softball questions and have set you up for a lot of different teams, a lot of storylines. But what about you, Jess? One storyline or one team that you're really interested in as we get ready to start the 2016 season?
The Houston Astros. I mean, this is a team that they beat the Yankees in the AL wild card. I mean, they kind of snuck their way in. Especially at the end of the season. They were really bad for so long. I think that even now the average baseball fan or the average fan is like, the Astros are good. Like, but you got to be kidding. Like, they don't even realize. And I think this year, as far as, I don't want to necessarily say dark horse, because anyone who's paying attention to baseball knows that this team is really good. But I think for the average fan, the casual fan that's watching baseball, the Astros are going to be really, really good this year. They're led by Carlos Correa, who, for those that haven't heard his name, that's going to be a household name today, like right now, this year. I mean, just watching him play, the way he handles himself, and he leads a very young, energetic team that just has fun. I mean, they remind me of the Blue Jays in a lot of ways, the way they kind of just pass the bat, just have that kind of great mix of different guys that can do different things, but a lot of confidence, and it's almost intimidating for any team that they're up against. So I like the Astros, and that's a team that I'm kind of looking forward to keeping an eye on, at least in the American League.
It really is true. Hope springs eternal for every team right now. We're just days away from the 2016 season getting underway. You can follow her on Twitter at Jess Mendoza, and then catch her on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN all season long. Jess, it's great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for a couple of minutes.
Amy, I love your knowledge as well. Thank you very much.